Welcome to The Circle, where we tap into the journey of life, spirituality, and wellness. We are the BoujAunties.
So today, we are speaking about menopause.
Yeah, a topic that a lot of us are so daunted by because of historical conversation.
Yeah.
That-
Definitely the history of menopause was given in a way that it wasn't it wasn't something you was looking forward to.
Yeah.
Right?
Even when you see your own aunts going through menopause, I used to be like, oh my God, that won't be me. Up to now, I still have that thing in my head that's not going to be me.
I think the every person probably said that's not gonna be me, right? And the people around them are probably going, it's you. It's you.
Right.
Definitely you.
Right.
One of my clients when I first became a massage therapist, she was going through menopause. And she said, all of a sudden, I'm allergic to this, I'm allergic to that. Things that I used to eat, I can't eat anymore. And she said, but more importantly, the things I used to care about, I don't care about anymore.
Right.
And she said there's a freedom in how she expresses herself and how she moves through. But she said what she's learning how to do is do it with a little bit more gentleness and not slash and burn techniques, just telling people I don't care anymore, right? Exactly. So that, she said, caused more it was just more problems. Right?
Yeah.
So what were the menopause stories you heard of, when you actually understood what menopause was, or what did you witness? You spoke about your aunts.
Yeah, so I remember my aunt, she oh my God, she would probably kill me for this, but she always used to burst into a sweat like some kind of rising phoenix, and when she was always active.
Right.
So all of a sudden she would be like, whenever you hear her go, whew, and start fanning, I'm like, you're going through it?
It's happening.
Yes,
It's actually happening.
it was it was always an you're going through it. It was always an event,
Oh my God.
Yeah, and it was always like a momentary.
But I think it is an event, right?
It
isn't been that momentary for you. Yeah. My grandmother, I think my first understanding that menopause, something was a thing, was happening.
Yeah.
She would be sewing at her sewing machine, and she had a way of she would unzip her back zipper just a little bit, just to get a little air.
Breathe.
And then all of a sudden she would take her wig off and just like that. And I was like,
oh my God,
what is happening here, right? But I didn't, I'm a small child, so I don't know why my grandmother is fanning herself with her wig. But what I do know is that when my mom was going through menopause, it was a different, she decided she was going to tell us everything that annoyed her about us. And we heard it. We were like, oh, you mean from when I was 5? And she's like, yes, right? Those things made me wonder, did menopause have to be so emotionally difficult? And did it have to be so arduous in the heat? And speaking to that first person, my first client, it just felt like a liberation. You just kind of get to control your process so you can be comfortable.
Yeah.
Your comfort becomes first.
Yeah.
That's not the story that people tell you.
No, it's not. It's
That's not the story at all.
You know what made me not afraid of menopause, the events anymore? Apart from the fact of disconnecting myself from it. Okay, that's one.
That's one.
2, when I went to massage therapy school and you saw the inner workings of how science works in our bodies and connects to our bodies, the anatomy, the physiology, the chemistry, the physics, all that stuff that we learned, you realize that you do have a measure of control.
Yes.
That menopause is just not a brick that hits you.
That's just happening
Right.
to you. Right.
Right.
And within all those things, it made me just, all those parts, including pathology,
Right.
it makes you go, oh, I play a role in this.
Yeah.
Like I can, however I decide I want this role to be, however powerless it may seem, whatever,
Right.
I can find my power in whatever way I'm going to show up.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because growing up, when you talked about menopause, instead of actually calling it what it was,
Yeah.
the biggest thing was calling it the change.
The change. But I was like, what are you changing to? Because my little graphic mind, I'm like, so something's gonna happen. I mean, I we're the way that our bodies just does things, right? And it's so magical. All human body, right?
Yeah.
When I think of this body that I'm in, the way that it has transformed in so many different ways,
Mm-hmm.
it makes me wonder, when menopause does happen,
Mm-hmm.
there is a change, right? There's a transformation, but not in this way that my imagination as a 5 or 6, 7-year-old listening to the older aunties going,
Right.
so what's happening?
Yeah.
Like,
I'm gonna be
and
taking my clothes off everywhere.
so my biggest concern was hearing that you would lose your sexual libido, right?
Yes.
And I was just like, no, wait, no.
That-
Like never. No. Okay. But when I looked at, you look at your mother, you look at your grandmother,
Mhm.
my mom's gonna kill me for this, but that hasn't been a thing for her.
Right.
Right. And so if I'm patterning portions of myself of what's happening with me with what came from my mother, I'm like, okay, right, I'm good, but still studying and still looking and still wondering about how to keep increasing the joy for sex and all the things. I think it's effort, right?
Right.
If you
I
put
think
in
so.
that effort, right?
Yeah.
And menopause,
Right.
it's like a huge conversation.
It is a huge conversation, and there's so much to be addressed in menopause. It's a conversation that we can have like for days almost, because you're also talking about the evolution of womanhood, right? Right. Womanhood has evolved from since the 1950s, 1940s,
I mean,
as far as we could imagine it.
I'm
back.
like from the naught to zero,
Right. Right?
God was like, okay, come.
Right, it's evolving,
Mhm.
and right before our faces
Yeah.
in this millennia, it's
And
evolving.
you're feeling it.
Yes.
Right.
So with all that evolution, I would think that our mindsets in embracing certain parts of life, namely menopause, it also has changed, because we are also embracing our femininity and our womanhood and our masculinity. I mean, all of ourselves, we are really, including and really paying attention to when it comes to us being women, right? And how we function with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, one of the things that I'm happy for is that it's an open conversation, as opposed to it being around the kitchen table kind of thing, or just something like we said, the Rising Phoenix kind of events, where you're bursting into flame.
Sometimes I think that's what people feel.
Right.
And then there's those spaces where, when like you ask, like the women ahead of you,
Yeah.
well, what did it feel like?
Right.
And my mom was like, oh, I didn't really have hot flashes.
Right.
I said, oh.
Yeah.
And I was like, please let me have hot flashes.
Right.
Because I didn't want that emotional, like that swing that she was
Right.
doing.
Right.
I was like, you have to just kind of poke your head in the house sometimes and go,
Okay.
who are we going to meet, right? Because it was always going to be a very blatant, let's have a conversation. About what?
Right.
what do we do, right?
Uh-huh.
I think you can't choose, though, right? You can't choose if it's going to be flashes, if it's going to be you suddenly can't eat shellfish, or you know, your body type changes, or even the emotions. You can't, but there's some preparation that you could be living your life in, right?
Right. Because perimenopause is a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
That break before we actually go into full blown, fine wine essence.
Not the fine wine.
Yeah, there is that fermentation stage, right? Which
Yes.
is perimenopause.
Yes.
Right? So
I'm hoping, like, so I was out the other night and I went to like this really amazing dinner, and the chef, oh my god, this young woman was just like, wow, Haitian, just all the things. Food felt good. And I said, how do you perform to this extent? And how do you take care of your body? Because she's doing all these different events. And she said, oh, I go to the gym, I meditate, I do yoga, I step away, I find time for myself. That made me feel so good, because the space of burnout is what doesn't allow you to properly prepare for the different transformations that happen to your body.
right,
From
most definitely.
childbirth to menopause to periods for the first time. If you're like in a state of exhaustion,
Yeah.
it comes in a way that doesn't. There's not much room for flow.
Yeah.
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 And it makes you realize how important those pockets of rest that we make for ourselves or don't make for ourselves.
Don't make for
Right.
Yeah.
How important they are, right? Because it helps us actually realize there's a space for processing, right? That we need to go through.
And also, there's a generational shift that you look up and you go, I knew I could look at what didn't work. It was sufficient, right? But that thing of working yourself to a bone, never stopping, you don't eat what is necessary for your body to thrive,
Right.
All like fill in all the blanks of all the things that looks like neglect, right? That is something that is a generational shift where people are like, no, like I don't want to have that experience. I want to have a different experience.
Right.
And so my hope is conversations like these that keep encouraging it to go even beyond the point of perimenopause, like beyond the point of your period. Like, what are we showing, our daughters and the next generation of, like, how do you treat your body?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's where the conversation, like you said, way before adulthood should really come in. I noticed like in schools, even when we were growing up, they kind of mentioned the cycle, but they didn't go. There are a lot of women walking around who have, who still, are surprised by some of the changes that we go through. Emotionally, they're still surprised by that.
I think the tap in is, the information is there, but the shame is still, I think, something that is like a far away space, but it still exists a little bit. I think people, the women that I've circulate with, they're very in tune with their body. They talk about their body. They know their body, right? And that's pretty far reaching out in the women who I'm exposed to. But there is, I think there's still a generation that is still kind of cut off from what's happening, from your neck down, right? And that generation is interspersed with like so many different people. It's not just, if you're 50 or 40 or 20. But it's a choice to really begin to know yourself. Right? Even if no one shows you, like you have to, at some point, bump into yourself to know what you like. Like why you must look, because it's yours. No, I'm sorry. I'm
for real.
Like, that's why you must look, because it's yours. Like you must at least know. We're talking about menopause, but it's bigger than menopause. Like, do you even know what your vagina looks like? Do you hold a mirror up and look and like see? From the vantage point of what you're familiar with, all the parts of you. Because if you know what it looks like, know what it feels like, know what it smells like, all the things,
all that stuff.
then if something shifts, you can be like, oh wait, that's not how my body's supposed to
Right,
feel.
right,
Right?
right.
Like that, like it's taken autonomy over those spaces. So if we could get that from early stages, by the time you get to the space of menopause, right? It's not like this scary marketed, thing. That's when, if we shift that concept, at least for me, and where my mom was just like, she was on it. Like if you did it, you would hear about it. Right. And it was a difficult time to be around her because she was only truth. But what was it? She was spitting truth. She was spitting truth. Truth, right? And you were getting it if you didn't want it, right? But she was also very intuitive, and so we don't speak about the space of where you're elevating to, right?
Yes.
Like that knowing, right?
Yeah.
That you don't really move that easy, right?
Yeah.
Because of this way that your body is transformed.
Yeah. And as the body's transforming, we're also going through a mental and spiritual transformation too.
And
right?
everybody around you.
Yes.
And everybody
everyone around you kind of feels it or whatever. But it's so nice that you mentioned that part of it. When you're, okay, I'm going to use a cliche term, when you're in the red, like youthful and exuberant. I mean, we're still youthful and exuberant. I think that's a state of mind.
It is.
So I'm not going to fall into that space of, oh my gosh, age is, age is what you want to make of it. But it's so good that you mentioned that when we move into that fine wine stage, it's like there's a different type of perspective that starts happening because you're shifting, right? So,
I mean, I love where this is going.
Because it's like you're not, like you said, you're not as timid anymore. You don't care too much about
which that part is
people see you and
there's
stuff like
fine
that.
wine, right? And then there's vinegar. One little direction off, and nobody's really appreciating that vinegar unless it's on something that they need it for.
Right.
So I think it's that balance, right?
Yeah.
It's like that. It's that slow, that pause that comes into how you decide you want to react to certain things, where your attention is brought to.
Right.
It's that's what makes it define wine. Yeah. Did I send you that thing about the cheetah and the greyhound?
No, I don't think so.
So I saw this meme post, whatever, and it's about a cheetah and a greyhound was set up to race, and the greyhound, as soon as the gate opened up, bust out, and he's just running. Cheetah didn't move, right? So everybody was like, why is the cheetah not running? And it goes on to say, essentially, know your worth, right? The cheetah doesn't have to race. He knows he's faster than the greyhound. He's just like, I'm not here to run until I need to, right? And it's those spaces that sometimes you find yourself racing against something that has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
I think that's where our body is. Our body is in a space that if we know our worth, we don't have to chase what something is supposed to feel like.
Right.
Because we know what's worthy of what makes us feel good. Right. We know how our body's are we supposed to be feeling pain in our lower back?
Right.
Is that a norm, right? Is it our necks and shoulders, that's supposed to be always tight? Is that a norm? And if it is a norm, how do we shift it? And that goes from, I think, outside and then definitely inside and vice versa.
Yeah. That is true. One of the things that we tend to fall into, one of the gaps that we tend to fall into, is that we always want to hold on to the space of youth, right? And when we're going through menopause, we tend to sometimes, I think what makes the space a difficult space to navigate for some of us is that we always wish, like you said, wish that we were and don't accept where we are in the presence and worship that space.
And worship that space.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Really love yourself where you're at.
Yeah.
Because I think when you do that, it allows you to actually appreciate the process and the journeying a bit more.
Yeah. And then also, you don't have to feel like you're trying to be something that you're not, right?
Exactly.
And so the authenticity of your dopeness of your everyday, that's the part that I think people see.
Yeah.
Like I have several friends who are in their 70s, and I say friend because they're like, please let me to be your friend. I have nowhere near the amount of experience that y'all have, but I want to hear these stories, right? And I watch them and how they maneuver through this life. You wouldn't know that you don't know their age, right? You don't know anything about, they're in their 60s, they're in their 70s, but they live life so vibrant and exuberant and almost childlike, right? That you're not considering age. You're considering, oh my God, I just want to be around you, right? I want to feel and engage and share, right? I think when we lose that flexibility, that stiffness, that softness, that's when it starts feeling like, oh, maybe I'm missing something. So the goal is to always find ways to, no matter what's happening, to tap into that softness, right? To tap into that. Like sometimes, you just got to go that extra walk so you can see something pretty to make you smile.
Yes.
If you can't find anything around you, go look for it. To keep that softness. And I think that's all part of that process, of that menopause process.
It is.
Right?
It is. There is so much beauty in watching yourself change, watching yourself transform.
Absolutely.
To me, entering into that menopausal arena, yes, it slows you down. I guess that's why it's a kind of pause. It slows you down, and it helps you actually define what letting go of a former level, and it's also a really defining graduation stage.
Absolutely.
When you're entering into that level, there are certain things that you really don't have to deal with anymore, like having to be in that that 28-day cycle of going through, however many days to go through that, flushing period when we do have our periods. But we do that in other ways when we're in that stage, right? That flushing period when we're in a menopausal stage. Like we may not be bleeding, but there are other ways that we are pouring out from ourselves when we're in menopause, like emotionally.
I'm nodding and in agreement with it, and also that going back to that space of being present in wherever you are, right? And so when you're in the bleeding phase, when pre-bleeding, right? There was that space where you were anxious and were like, okay, when am I going to get my period? When am I going to get my period? Right? I mean, I was ready.
Right.
Pads, tampons, shapes, sizes, whatever. I was like, I am ready when this thing happens.
Right.
And I wasn't. I was at school. And nothing with me. I was so mad.
All of them was
everything is in the closet. And then, getting pregnant, or trying to get pregnant, as people are going through those spaces of where they find it is suddenly it's difficult to get pregnant, and trying to understand your body in that space too.
Right.
All of it, I think, is way more, I can't say easier, but it helps to bear the process when somehow you're able to sit in where you are.
Right.
And so I didn't have and I still don't really have very heavy cramps or where some people they can barely get up, right?
Yeah.
I think at some point after I started having children, those symptoms dissipated.
Right.
Food and and diet changed that a lot
Right.
as well, right?
Right.
But still, my body is still moving even through in those times into these different changes that I'm going, oh, well that's different. Well,
Right.
what's that, right?
Right.
I think being present allows you to notice.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
The noticing. The noticing, I think, is what allows you to not make it better,
Right.
but again, coming back to that autonomy of, I'm part of this.
Yes.
Nothing is happening to me.
Right.
Like, nothing is being done to me.
Right.
And that, the first time I heard that your intuitive self rises when you're menstruating,
Yeah.
I was like, well, it must be around all the time.
Yeah.
There must be different waves and times, and how do you tap into that?
Yes.
Yeah, and
Yes.
it's been that journey for me, and quite a lot of people who were around me. Like when I listened, I'm like, oh, okay, not alone.
Right.
Everybody's kind of tapping in and figuring it out, and I really feel it's connected to that ability to create.
Right. Right.
Whatever it is inside of us, and how we create life is also us recreating ourselves too.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the whole, tapping into intuition and, accepting the beauty of transformation, because that's what it is.
And not ignoring that some of it is not that beautiful.
I was just going to say
it's
that.
difficult. It's
You
all
understand?
the things, allow those spaces to
Yes,
be. Yeah.
yes. You have to just allow these spaces to be. And I think the more and more that we have conversation with different demographics of women and different ages, it's kind of comforting because you're seeing people who are entering that stage. You're seeing people who are far away from it.
Yeah.
Just having that conversation and that sisterhood allows you to navigate events that are really, that might seem like crisis events in our lives, but they're not because, we're sharing the information.
Yeah.
What about things that we're going to experience, like the losing of the hair, the changing of the body odor, the changing of skin texture, how do we navigate those spaces?
Again, I think it's the knowing of yourself,
Right.
and there's also acceptance.
Right.
There's just looking at the different sides of my family, I can go, oh, okay, I can expect certain things, right?
Yeah.
And exercise and diet shifts a lot of how the things that you're expecting, it shifts that, because just because my parents or my aunts went through a particular thing in their life, it also, what were the dynamics that they were dealing with? What were they eating? What were they dealing with? And how do I do that differently?
Yeah.
I think the answer to any of those things is keep looking back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Keep looking back.
Family history, familial history is so important.
Yeah.
In helping you navigate certain things with yourself. Like, I think if that's why it's so good to have those important conversations with women that came before you. And that's why it's so important. Yes, it is. To observe them. That's what they're there for, like things like, how does, if you know how you store fat in your body, or how you handle stress, and with us having the knowledge of how stress kind of, helps certain things in the body change and fluctuate, you could navigate spaces like menopause with a lot of emotional intelligence and grace,
Grace, yeah.
So, menopause is, it's a
blessing.
It's a blessing.
And I don't say it lightly.
It's a transformative
Yeah, I don't say it lightly because, of course, there's medical induced menopause. There's all different kind of variations.
Yeah.
To be able to see how my body transforms and be aware of it.
Yeah.
To me, it speaks to all the other things I'm trying to implement into
Right.
my life. Right?
Yes.
And so I'm like, I'm blessed to have that awareness.
Yeah, I am too.
Yeah.
One of the things that I want to hit on before we wrap up is that during this period, we do go through a lot of emotional change,
That's the part.
and we do go through a lot of mental change. And some of that mental change might come off as a little bit of instability. For me, I think having a sisterhood that's very nurturing, having a forum where you can talk and really feel free to share how things are affecting you in that period is very important too. What do you think?
I think that this is a conversation that has to be continually had.
Yeah.
The space of being able to support each other.
Yeah.
It's the pause, right?
Right.
It's the pause to be able to go, how and whatever is happening, something is happening. I mean, I know how to put my finger on it, but something is happening in this person, in my sister. And us being able to pause enough to go, do you need a moment?
Right.
You know, or even not even say that. Just give the moment, right?
Yeah.
I think that only happens when you're doing that for yourself.
Right.
Right. And so that space of owning, taking care of yourself, owning, acknowledging it for you. Like this, I know I'm going through something.
Yeah.
Let me maybe get a therapist.
Yeah.
Right? Let me really start seeking out help.
Yeah.
It's the decision first comes within.
Yeah.
And then I think that circle, that communal, that sisterhood, brothers, or everyone can be in there to go, let's nurture you.
Yeah.
Right? There's cultures where when a woman menstruates, she's celebrated.
Yes.
You know, she's raised up into the community where it's like, now you're here and you're present, right? There should be another elevation, right? There should be a celebration, and first we have to be the celebratory ones, right?
Yes.
And then share it out into the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So keep asking for their support.
Yeah, most definitely. Womanhood is a beautiful thing, and things like going through this event allows us to really embrace it and to really experience how beautiful womanhood is. Nieces and nephews, menopause is also a space that we want our male counterparts to really share with us, because we share a lot of ourselves with our counterparts.
That's how it's going to elevate,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's not just I'm here going through this. No, if I'm going through something, I'm sure you're feeling that energy.
Of course. And we need to have conversations with with nephews, just to show how they could be supportive and, connective during that process, of us going through our transformation. If you enjoyed this conversation, please like it and comment. We want to hear how our sisters or brothers who are connected to sisters that are going through the transformation, what do you have in place as a support system?
That's
right?
And it's always about support.
Yeah, it is. That's how we show our, reflective care and love for each other.
Absolutely.
Share. We always know that the BoujAunties drop some gems in there, in our conversation.
Yes.
And subscribe. And
our subscriptions are growing.
They are. So
thank
you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
We're not
banging
so
the bell anymore.
Yeah, we're not banging the bell.